Welcome to a new episode of Advancing Consciousness series with Franco Di Nicola. This is a place where people can come to gain further insight and clarity as to what is going on and how we can shift things on a personal and global level, while also accessing higher levels of consciousness and awareness. We bring this series to you free of charge so that many are able to access this information. However, if you resonate with what Franco shares and you would like to support his work to get more content out, contributions are welcomed and greatly appreciated. A link is in the description and will be provided in the chat if you feel guided to do so. Also, we have many previous workshops, such as the most recent, Bringing Out the New You to Play in the New World, along with our membership program, Let's Talk About You, where like-minded people come together bi-weekly to talk about the topics requiring deeper understanding and clarity. All of these are available on Teachable, and we encourage you to check them out as they are great resources at very affordable prices to assist in better understanding this human experience. The Teachable link will also be provided in the chat and is also in the description. And lastly, don't forget to share. As more of us come together who are creating shifts in themselves, the more effective it will be to shift things globally. Thank you for joining us and being part of the change. Enjoy today's broadcast.
So welcome everybody to another episode of Advancing Consciousness series. Tonight is episode 18, and we're going to look at some things a little deeper. We're going to looking at clearing up and looking deeper into what is taking place right now on this planet and all the things that are unfolding at this point in time. My intention was to do this yesterday. Unfortunately, certain things came up, and my physical essence did not support me to be able to function yesterday to do it, so here we are today. Anyways, we're going to cover all the things that we intended to cover, and we're going to go into it. Now, this one's a little challenging to do in a way because we're going to be really dancing in certain areas that may feel not polarized, but uncomfortable in some ways, possibly, but it's going to be presented the way it needs to be presented so that you get an understanding as a foundation, but not to see that as something that's going to, be taken as we've been taking everything else right now. Because there's so much going on, as we've talked about it before, and there's a lot of different new information, different spins on things coming up and so forth. And a lot of people are communicating their viewpoints, they're communicating what they've been studying one another from and whatever's taking place. There's a lot of talk about what are the motives of what is taking place now and has been taking place at this point, what the agenda might be, and things of that nature. And it has a tendency to bring us into a polarized state where, we can see, we've been taken advantage of, that we were being abused, or in some way we were enslaved and so forth. I mean, some of that, if you look at from a certain viewpoint, can look that way and can be said, okay, that's how it's been experienced. However, there's a bigger part to all of that. And yes, absolutely, there have been so many different role players that have played different roles over the last thousands of years at this time, up to this point in time. But we're in a very unique time now because it is something very different than anything that we've experienced even in previous multiple incarnations on planet Earth. And so it's looking at a deeper understanding, maybe possibly just an origin, a basic origin of how things came about and how things have been played out, and what that is leading us to at this point in time. So I felt that it was important for us to bring some clarity and understanding from a broader perspective so that we actually go into an empowered state rather than going into an angry state, judgment state, victimizer state, going into corruption state and all of that stuff. As much as there's a lot going on around that, and now it's coming to the exposure, especially when people are talking about being awake or becoming more awake. And what does that mean, becoming more awake? You're just becoming more aware of other parts of the experience that we weren't so aware of. So the first stage is to kind of see the game a little bit more, how it's played out, rather than being in a complete sleep mode where we just followed a set of rules and so forth without questioning or looking at anything. The second part is now you start to see behind the scenes sort of thing, and you get to see some of the things that are unfolding and what's been taking place for so long. And some of it takes you back quite a bit in the history, the history of when we're looking at how did it all come about, and how did we get into this particular position, and how did this all these systems come in place, and the role players came into place, how did all this hierarchy and all of this other stuff that come into place, because in natural state it quite isn't worked that way. But how did it all come about? So that's the second stage of awareness. The next part of awakening, if you want to call it that, now you're connecting more and more who you are. Now, that stage still has certain components that you will look at. Okay, I'm spiritual, non-spiritual, but everything is spiritual. But when we're talking about spiritual, understanding that you are more than the body, more than the roles and the games and whatever else. However, until we get to the next stage where we actually go into a deeper understanding and awareness, that's the only place you actually start. That's only the start of appreciating the playground, appreciating one another and all the roles that are being played. Because in all those other stages, the appreciation is not quite there. So you're going in from a sleep state to starting to see behind the scenes what's going on and how the game is played. Then you're now noticing the next part of it, that you're more than this, but you're still playing with part of it. And then the next stage after that is now seeing it all as a game, seeing it how you are empowered, how you actually are the navigator. And even the choice of not navigating, which is still a choice of navigating. Either you piggyback on somebody or not, or piggyback on a group or not. Those are the choices you have. And you get to see those choices. Then, of course, there's other levels of awakening that you can go. Like if you're talking about fully awake, then you basically see yourself as one. You see yourself as what you are, source. And now as source, it's very difficult in that state to maintain any form, because that awareness negates a lot of the construct that you would choose to play. So a lot of things that we're also looking at is underlining purpose and discoveries being made along the way, because a lot of us now are questioning things more than ever. If you look back, even in your own life, for most people, and also a lot more people that are still there, basically how the game was played seemed like the only game in town. That was the only way to experience life. There was no questioning whatsoever. No looking at how does this work? Why does it work this way here and this way there? And why is this one way or another? That wasn't even in the radar, in any questioning whatsoever, because all we saw, this is the game. I came here to play the game or whatever else. But a lot of people didn't see themselves coming to play the game. They saw themselves, they were put in the game by some deity or some other source energy of some sort, said, okay, you're going there, like it or not, right? And that's kind of how a lot of perceptions were made prior to that. Now, as we're going along, you start looking at more of the game and getting a deeper understanding. So, with all of this playing out, with different stages of people becoming more aware, as they're still working through the ego programming and the right, wrong, good, bad, and all of that stuff that still navigates them, people have a tendency to go into either fear, anger, or feeling that they're completely victimized in one way or another for a period of time. And that is a transitional part, because really you'll notice if you're there, you're in a disempowered state. If you're in that state too long, you'll notice it gets really super uncomfortable. But the thing is, we've come here to raise our vibration, to experience life on a completely different way. And as long as we're still seeing, even if you see the back end of how things are, if you're not using discernment, if you're not using consent or any of those parts, and you're still judging it and seeing that this force has something over you and you have no say in the matter, then you're kind of still stuck in the game. And this is the part that I wanted to focus on and have us walk through it so that we get a deeper understanding and also how to use it to kind of shift within ourselves. So one of the things you have to understand, anything that was from a public realm, coming from authorities or coming from any structures, governmental or various other authoritative positions and so forth, whatever we were receiving, whatever we were told, whatever we were programmed to believe, we accepted. We didn't even question it. That was very rare. Sometimes you felt puzzled and saying, what's really going on? And I don't get this. But at the same time, not much questioning was. Whatever the narrative was shared from a media perspective, we took as real, no questions asked. And if it was given to us by some authority or governmental level or some even religious faction or teacher or something like that, we did not question it. It was not something we would question. And the few that did, really went back into stop questioning. That's not now. That's been changing for some time now. And what we've noticed is that what we took as fact, we're looking more closely at. Not only that, we're actually challenging it. Look at right now what's going on. Everything that is being publicized through the media, through all these so-called experts and so forth, around everything that's going on with our present condition of lockdown, whatever it is you want to call it, or virus or whatever, okay? With all of that playing out, and any other people call false flags and so forth, where staging took place, we're not quite accepting it that way. A lot of people are still doing it that way, but it's starting to break down for them too. Because even the hardcore people that actually gave 150% value in whatever the authoritative said or whatever some media outlet said or anything of that nature are starting to question things. And it's being questioned very purposefully. But how many right now are questioning it and judging, not even judging, challenging it, showing other viewpoints, showing that it isn't quite what we are being told. It doesn't even work this way. Look at it this way. Right now we have a narrative coming in and there's a lot of fear and a lot of confinement going on. And many, many experts, and when I say experts, people that are in the field, actual grounds people, boots on the ground like they call it. I think Todd uses that one a lot. But anyways, when you're looking at that, they're coming up and say, hey, listen, what we are receiving as instructions to do and what we are actually seeing and for what we are involved with, there's a mismatch. It does not match. It doesn't even come to play. So more and more people are not only doing their own research a little deeper, they're questioning in a huge way, because they're not open to just accept what is being said. Why? That is because we are starting to awaken more and more to see that the power we have given to these resources, now we want to take that power back in a sense, saying, I'm now going to make my own decision. I'm going to look at things, and I'm not only going to take one source. I'm going to take a multiple levels of sources of information. And also other people that actually have proof and have actually personal experience. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other and whatever else. What I'm saying is that people become more open and say, okay, I'm not going to just take that. I'm just going to take this. Let me do research. And more people are becoming more research bound, or what we call research addicts in a sense, because you start looking more and more into things and you start questioning things. So you're not really taking the whatever is being shared anymore. Now, you've noticed this trend the last several years, because even a lot of the false flags, so-called, where things were staged for us to believe a certain thing, you could see how they were challenged very quickly, and actually because people were actually observing and wanting to get more out of it, they went deeper into looking at what really was going on and sharing it in a big way. The internet has played a huge role for that. So there's much more information. Of course, there's a lot more disinformation too. So you have to really look at the different source information and then really use your own discernment, use your own resonance to see what actually matches what you feel inside. Because we have a very powerful intuitive capacity within ourselves, which we stopped trusting a long time ago, but now we're starting to see it's nudging us to pay attention, because we're here to navigate you. That's what your intuitiveness is. That is your body consciousness talking to you, your human entity consciousness talking to you, and your soul consciousness is talking to you. And of course, we have multiple facets of ourselves playing all over the place, and we're really nudging ourselves. So the questioning is going deeper and deeper. And the thing is, we're also looking at it and not jumping into the bandwagon, whatever's being offered from the mainstream any longer, because we're saying, okay, there may be some parts to this I can use, but I want to get the rest of it. So when you really look at it, you look at a lot of different areas. We're questioning not only what we get from government, from education, we're getting medical advice, whatever it is. We're starting to look further, and we're opening ourselves to look for alternatives. And what we mean by alternatives is meaning that we look at other potentialities and resources rather than the limited resources that we've been provided. So the other thing that we've also noticed is that the so-called authorities and the people in position of power, many more are starting to realize they may not have the qualities needed to direct our life, direct our world, direct our systems. Because as you start to notice things, that a lot of the people in certain authoritative and power positions really don't have the capacities to even have an open enough mind to look at a bigger picture of what's really going on. So what does that do for us? What it does for us, it gives us the opportunity to see, oh, wait a minute, I'm putting all my trust, I'm putting all of my input from them as a value center or something that I use to navigate, but I'm also realizing that they're not really understanding what's going on. In fact, I don't even think they know what they're talking about. And then when you look at them, and especially the more aware you become, and this is the thing, that's why it's key to be as an observer. You don't want to get your emotions involved in things. As you are an observer, then you can see the antics, you can see the game, you could see how a bunch of people are just kind of supporting each other to play a particular game, but there is no real deeper understanding that we can actually change and design things that are conducive. So that's also being questioned a lot right now. So other people are also questioning the roles that we have taken, a lot of people have taken, where we just follow what we've been told, follow from extended from our families, we follow from our educational system, we follow from the media, we follow from the governments and so forth. And noticing that we are not only questioning, but we're looking at it and say, how does that, what I am receiving, seeing, exposed to, and being told to, how does that actually fit in to me? How does that fit in for me to be able to really shape my life that is in resonance for me, that actually is in balance with my own experience, that in fact it actually allows me to express perfectly as I am and allow me to be myself. So this is the other parts that are being challenged at this point. So, and when I say challenge, it's like we're not taking it as it's presented, we're looking at it closer. So a lot of us have gone through different systems. We've gone through, being taught and handed down information from our parents, from other meaning families, from educational system, from the media. And when I'm talking about media, we're talking about news and movies and music and whatever else. And then, of course, religious factions and whatever else that exists out there. And so-called other experts and so forth. And we've taken all of that and we've kind of shaped our lives around that. But now we're noticing the dissonance. We're also noticing an imbalance. We're also noticing it doesn't resonate because our true knowing is coming through, and that knowing is, or that information is not matching it. And what does that mean? That means that you are stepping more into that empowered state. You're stepping more into looking at how do I go into the navigating seat and design not only my life, my reality around me, but my complete playground we call Earth as we play together. Now, this is all part and parcel of all the changes that are occurring within ourselves. And it's all energetically based and consciousness based because everybody's talked about we need to change, we need to change, we need to change. Unless we start plugging in our own consciousness, a deeper understanding and a realization that this is a game that we actually can shape and co-create together in a way that it serves us, change is very difficult. It seems very difficult because we give so much power to structures, to systems, to, and when I'm talking about systems, all the different systems that we have in place of legal, of governmental, of education, medical, monetarily or financial, whatever you want to call it. And we can't make those changes because we feel that those things are rigid and you can't step out of it. But now we're noticing that deeper. And as we go deeper, you'll notice that the more consciousness you apply, the more consciousness you have access, you see how the game is so easy to shift. Now, of course, we're co-creating, so a larger number would have to participate, but we can start with ourselves, and we have, a lot of people have. And, all of the stuff that's going on right now. So, with all of this that's playing out at this point in time, one of the key things we have to look at is when we're going through these stages of realization or awakening, and what we call also accessing a little bit more understanding of what's going on, and some people call it ascension or whatever it is, we have to really pay attention to how we feel about what we are now starting to realize, because that will make a difference how quickly and easily you can move through the transition that you go through. Because if you notice certain things playing out, that there's rigged games, and that's how it can be looked at, that we can go into anger very easily, and that's a powerful emotion. We can go into hatred. We can go into all types of judgment or victimization and so forth, and feel that intensity of emotion. So it's a matter of noticing those emotions coming up and allow yourself not only to experience the emotion, but look at the story and program behind it, because you want to purge that. You don't want really to let that govern you, because as long as it's governing you, it slows down the process. Now, of course, we've been pushed and shoved and whatever else and nudged to move forward. So, it's not going to be like before where you could stay in that stuck state for a long period of time. But the newly ones that are becoming a little bit more aware, then they're noticing those intensities coming up much more, and then they can get caught up in that spiral, right? So because we have demonized and made villains out of our current systems and the current role players, right? But that also, when we do that, we're also creating or reinforcing that separation, and then we start using the energies that actually keep it locked in. And that's a good little taste you can have, but it's not necessary. We can move through this with so much more ease without getting caught up in all of that. And so that's why it's key to look at the emotions, or to be the observer, watch the emotions, whatever is coming up, feel it, acknowledge it for its presence, acknowledge the program, the story, feeling that, oh, I've been taken advantage of, or I'm disempowered, or this or that, whatever it is, or I've been, somehow harmed, or anything of that nature. And when you start noticing it and you start paying attention to the program around that, you can easily look at it in its appreciation for what it's provided for you. And then with love, you can let that go, unless it still serves you in one way or another. And that's a choice that you make. Okay, so I'm going to give a little brief history. This is where it gets a little touchy. And just so that you understand, just as a baseline fundamental understanding, so that, and somehow you can put things into context, like plug in the little pieces. Okay, so I know I've mentioned some of this before, but I will go a little deeper with it. Everybody's familiar with the Atlantean times, okay? So the time of Atlantis, and we had the Atlanteans and so forth. And they were a species like us, that had some pretty powerful opportunities to advance and become much more enlightened. And they had also the opportunity to experience the polarity, because it was offered to them also. Now, when we hear the stories of that, a reptilian race, an Anunnaki race, Arcturian, what's the other one? Draconian, and so forth. Anunnaki, Arcturian, reptilians, and all of those. When we look at that and say, okay, those were the cause of the trouble, and so forth. But to understand that when creation was made at a certain level, to accentuate polarity, to accentuate lack of consciousness, lack of light, and when I call light, spectrum light, we're talking about source code, source knowing, source creation, that there was a group that decided to play with programs, but it was a challenge to find programs that actually could be used in the various species that existed. So what they decided to do is to create that program and then create a hybrid species that would be able to operate within that program, which was very disconnected. Even though it's not possible to be disconnected, but it played out as disconnected. The program made it look like it was completely disconnected. And it had a very limited access point of consciousness, to the point where it actually consumed rather than evolve, in a sense. So then these hybrids were created. So the race that they ended up using to do that were a reptilian race, and then they made them into hybrids, not all of them, just a small portion of them, made them into hybrids, and they were called Draconians, and then they were called Anunnakis. Those were both spin-offs with slightly different programs. Now the program that they designed was what they called, or was called today, the Luciferian program, operating system. It's just a program. It's just a system. It doesn't have some form of deity or anything of that nature, but it was a program. And the two races that I mentioned, the Anunnaki and also the Draconian, were implanted with those operating systems in their hybrid form, because the reptilians continue to evolve. They're quite advanced. And they're very connected with us, because one of them, the reptilian race is one of our DNAs, one of our genetic encodements. They're actually one of the species that was an offering to create the human body on this plane. So these particular two races went around different planets and offered the opportunity to create this operating system And part of that was also what we call a satanic code, which, these are just names that begin, which actually created a code that would consume to destruction, which basically broke down the fundamental operating system to the point it all became source again, right? So it would go back to pure field energy, or what we call pure sourceness. So, but it also gave a platform for them to be able to see how integral the original designs were when this was plugged in. So they went from planet to planet to offer it. So they came on planet Earth at one point when the Atlanteans were here. And it was sometime after they were here. So when it was offered to them to be able to play with this operating system, of course they had to also do the same thing, create hybrids within the playground, because the Atlantean playground was not a conducive place for them to remain. They would actually have to blend and create hibernation. No, hybrid. Well, anyways, I'll call it hybrid. They had to create a hybrid, blending the Atlanteans with this particular draconian operating system, or what we can call an anarchy operating system, because there were both two different species. They were from the same family, but they were encoded slightly different. So they did that, and then they played that particular role. So the role basically itself, how it played out, even though the consciousness was advancing, or mainly the technology was advancing, because they were offered a lot of different technologies, those codes, those hybrids played such an intense role that those codes became so governing that Atlantis created an environment where it actually wiped itself out, in a sense. So that was the first experiment. Of course, you could look at the experiment failed, but the experiment basically looked at, okay, it got pushed a little difficult, and we let it go. Okay, so that's the Atlantean time. Then planet Earth was retooled. This goes back 15,000 years ago. It was retooled. So another set of engineers, which my soul was involved in as the engineer, retooled planet Earth, reseeded planet Earth, and then created new physicalities. And these new physicalities utilized 12 different species, all contributors, no hybrids, all contributors, and created these human physical forms. So they were also seated on planet Earth. And planet Earth was tuned, like I've said before, to be able to evolve, a self-evolving planet, basically from third dimension, organic third dimensional, all the way to ninth dimensional consciousness, step by step. And also could go up to fifth density. But it started off with third density. Anyways, so that was the platform that was set. And that was set 15,000 years ago. And for the first 1,000 years, they were, we can call engineers, guardians, or whatever it is, that would come and check on a regular basis to make sure that there was movement and progress made with this particular species, with the operating system. And there were tweaking going on. At that point in time, the bodies were very different in a sense. The physicality was a certain way, but the operating system was very different. Not what we relate to today, which we're slowly reverting to that. Right now, we're looking at those days, the bodies could lived for 1,000 years on an average, and did not break down, did not have, the system was designed to handle anything that was exposed. Of course, all the sentient beings, everything on the planet was all aligned into that. Did you have a question?
Someone was just asking, in what way do the Luciferians and satanic energies differ, or do they differ?
They're not. I will explain that a little bit more. Okay, so just remind me, just in case I get off topic there. Okay, so what we're looking at this point, when we're talking about, okay, I'll cover that real quickly. So what we call the Luciferian and the Satanics, they're both, they're two operating systems. call it sat, and we call it loose. They're both operating systems. And because of the system, how it's done, if you experience systems, when you're experiencing anything that you're experiencing, you're creating a pocket of consciousness. So what happens is we created a pocket of consciousness streaming both parts. Now, this one here was designed for us to take it to a point where we consume to destruction, I guess you want to call it to. Because if you look at it, it's just consume, 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 and wipes everything out. It's a cancer cell replicates that in a sense. Because what does a cancer cell do? It basically, with the right environment, and that's the key here, the right environment, it will destroy or convert or mutate different cells until to the point, it brings you to the point of exiting out because it destroys the host, which is the body. And that's what that operating system is. The other one is actually, it's all based on fear, power, control, dominance, separation from your core essence of sourceness. And I'll explain why these things have changed since it's plugging in that took place. Okay, so we'll just carry on. So with that, when our bodies were all restored, for the first 1,000 years, we were monitored and making sure that we got to a point where we had our own grounding, we had a good baseline, and then we went into self-governance. So we self-governed, this starting 15,000 years ago, just to give you a little clarity, for 1,000 years, and then the other 4,000 years after that, we were in self-governance. Self-governance meant that you were basically all working together to create an environment that was supportive for everybody there without having any confines and rules and so forth that, like the training wheels will come off. So for the first 1,000 years, you kind of had some what you call training wheels, and the engineers would time to time check and tweak the operating system to make sure that it was on track with what it wanted to experience or what it wanted to accomplish as another playground. So these, you have to understand, these are video games sort of things that we're looking at. So after the 4,000 years, so now we're talking 5,000 years, so that was about 10,000 years ago. This particular race that we talked about that presented themselves at Atlantean time represented themselves again on planet Earth. And this time they offered it to the humans, the existing humans that we are, and offered us the opportunity to take on this particular program, which it was sold as the idea that it would make the game more challenging, and as you move through it, you would be not only more skilled, but you would even be more powerful. Now, you could say, well, that was deceptive, but it wasn't really, because it had that potential. Did it actually accomplish? Yes and no, because it is being accomplished now. And at that time, you really went into the experiential part. So at 10,000 years, then at 5,000 years, then at 3,500 years, and 1,500 years ago. Okay? So I'm just giving you an idea. So they came here, originally reprogrammed everything. Our human bodies changed. DNA's, most of it got turned off. 2 got just filtered. We had our operating system changed. We would not just get energy from just the environment. Now we had to consume food and all of this stuff. So the original one was done here. Then they came back and tweaked it and different. Sometimes it was the Anunnaki, sometimes it was the Draconians that kept coming back. And they would be here and make modifications. The reason a lot of the modifications was because the energies collectively were increasing in the galaxy. And the stability of the program became somewhat not stable. Unstable? Unstable. And what's that? Did I say it correctly? Unstable. So they would actually put in upgrade patches, like we have these updates, that we put in. So they came in and put different updates along the way so that we would still stay in that part. Now, these particular visitors that offer this did not stay on planet Earth because it was not matching what their physical construct and their operating system could handle. Okay? So knowing that part of it, then what they had agreed to do was to take some humans and made hybrids out of them. I spelled that right?
Yep. Oh, hybrids are.
Hybrids? There's an R here, yeah. Okay. Made hybrids. So what they did is they actually used their programming and so forth and plugged it in to some of these humans. It was offered to them, and I guess there was a bit of a selling pitch that went with it. They had some good salespeople there. I'm just using that as a funny analogy because in a way they had to be convinced to take it on. So these are the ones that are so-called the elite, the cabal, the real high-end leaders, or have put in positions of leadership, were the ones of that, including monarchy, whatever it is. All the different levels of monarchies along the way, because there's been quite a few changes over the 10,000 years. So that they would be able to maintain that operating system. Now, of course, that required certain rituals, required certain things to be played out for them to stay consistent, because the planet in general did not host that hybrid portion of it that well. So a lot of things came about that we're being exposed to now, or at least we're becoming aware of at this point in time. So this particular, these hybrids basically had these particular codes, but we all have these codes, unfortunately, in us. Because if you allow it to operate, then you'll notice how it works. This other operating system was done mostly for the hybrids, but we didn't get away that easily, because if you look at it, this operating system was built on something that was installed in us. Did I say that, or didn't I? Go ahead. You were going to ask the question.
Philippa, the ones offering the inverted matrix are the same that created the original matrix?
No. The original matrix was done by a series of engineers. As I said, my soul was involved in it. This is one of the reasons it's doing what it's doing. But the inverted matrix were all offered by, well, let's put it this way. It was installed by Draconians, that they brought their technology, because it was part of their technology. So they did the inverted matrix, which carried a lot of those other programs, inverted matrix, which afterwards created the 2D and inverted 3D, but that came about with the inverted matrix running. At the same time, they also brought the moon in, because it wasn't here before. And the moon was used as a satellite for a long time. So when it was brought in, okay, the moon itself is a hollowed out planet that's been used as a transmitter to not only support this operating system and the inverted matrix mainly. Now, on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, because the moon doesn't rotate, it moves along, but the dark side is always the dark side, is where there is a series of these species that go back, that operate very deeply in the Luciferian operating system. And the reason they want there, because the sun itself, exposed to the sun, carries so much code, so much energy, that to hold a very limited operating system becomes very difficult. It goes through a transformation, a transmutation occurs because, and this is why they choose, because they're the ones that remained to work with planet Earth, even though they don't live here, but they worked with the ones that were put in place to kind of maintain that, that operating system and that so-called agenda, or whatever it was called at the time. Okay, so that, how can I say? So the moon was actually the transmitter, and it supported the inverted matrix. In fact, it actually projected the inverted matrix. It was also supporting this, the ego itself, and it was designed basically to reverse evolution, or reverse it from the starting point, because we all started off in organic 3D, and then with the inverted matrix and all the heavy-duty programming and all the hands of the beautiful hybrids, human hybrids, that played the role, that, you know, with all the programming and so forth, we started to go into the inverted 3D. And what the inverted 3D is that everything works backwards. And you could see that's really what we're working on. Everything is backwards. What is real is made a lie is made real, and whatever else. What is, you know, all systems, instead of supporting and advancing, it works opposite. So it's really backwards on that. And the 2D is when you've already gone from inverted 3D to 2D, and this is complete dormant state. This is where you actually have almost no access to consciousness at that point in time. You're basically see yourself as a machine. You're basically a human body having this particular time. Something placed you here. You're not even going to question. You have no idea. These are the rules. I play the game. And a lot of times we call them the extras because that's what they become. The extras, they're kind of part of the scenery, but they're not so active in playing an advancing role, but they play a role of holding back the old role. You had a question?
A couple little quick questions.
Quick question.
Okay. Each time were the inhabitants of planet Earth aware of the changes seated at the intervals that you were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Also, do the hybrids know they are hybrids? If so, how do they know?
Okay.
There was one other quick one about do we really have free will?
Yes. Okay, that's good. First one. Fire it again.
Okay.
Let me try that.
Were the inhabitants of planet Earth aware of the changes seated at these intervals?
These intervals? Yeah. Yes, they did notice a change within themselves. It's like any changes that we're feeling right now. Each time they did a modification, they would notice that their operating system. Now, were they super conscious of it? No. They would notice something changed. And there would almost be a blip in the matrix, because what happens is the matrix would be upgraded, and the operating system in the human, which was basically the ego part, would be upgraded. So all these additional upgrades would be put in to make sure that it was stronger than the input of information, consciousness, and energy that the planet was receiving. Because you have to understand, the planet is located at the center of a quadrant of our universe, or in this case, our galaxy, and the galaxy is evolving. So the energies within the galaxy, the level of consciousness within the galaxy just keeps increasing. So the stability of keeping an older cutoff programming in place becomes difficult. So then now you have to go in. It's like some of these virus programs that they put in, they're always putting in patch codes or whatever it is, because new viruses come along and can damage your computer, or be taken over by that. Because in fact, we're kind of similar to a computer. So each time they came in, there was a modification done, we would notice something was going on. Now, it doesn't matter what we saw. For us to be here, we knew what the game was like. We knew what stage they were at. We all wanted to take a go at it. All of us wanted to say, okay, let me see what I can do. Even at different stages as it got deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, there hasn't been any more upgrades that long. There hasn't. So you could see why a lot of things are changing right now, because it hasn't been upgraded. Even though there was like minuscule amount of upgrade. Actually, there was one at 300 years ago, but it didn't have the same impact. It wasn't the biggest revision to the operating system. So at that point in time, it wasn't as noticed. So what was the second question?
Do hybrids know they are hybrids? If so, how do they know? Did you finish the Luciferian operating system? Because someone is saying that you didn't quite finish.
Okay.
So jumping all over, I guess.
Okay. So yes, regarding the hybrids itself, they knew that they took on that role. Okay, that they were. So they were aware that they were actually, now it was sold to them as superior. If you take this operating system, okay, you become a hybrid, you become a ruler, you become powerful, you control the planet's outcome, the people's outcomes, and whatever else. So it was sold as a very powerful power struggle, not a struggle, what do you call it? Yeah, when you give somebody lots of power. It was just anything to, an opportunity to have all this power and say, oh wow, I don't even just navigate myself, I navigate all of that. Now they realize that they're hybrids because for them to stay intact as hybrids, there are various rituals they have to do, which we started to hear more about it in the last several years. And more, now it's coming to the surface on a big time. Not everybody locks into that, but so there are various rituals they have to do. They have to actually keep accessing this and this pocket of consciousness. And when I'm talking about consciousness, everything is a consciousness. It's an operating system. If you get a bunch of people together and you all hang on to a certain belief, you've just made a pocket of consciousness. So this Luciferian consciousness has groups that support it in a sense where they're saying, okay, this makes us superior, this makes us whatever it is, right? So they're able to tap into this. Again, this is just an operating system. The operating system is around dominance, control, basically having power over everyone and not allowing anybody any free space to play the game of life. And to the point where, it's, how can I say, you can't really use source essence within it. It's so minimized. Now, when we're talking about that operating system, it was designed so that it would be so far away from knowing itself as source. And so a lot of people refer that to the dark. And why did they call it the dark? Because in essence, they don't have the light codes, or they've turned off most of their light codes. It does not access it. It's programmed to do that so that it's only within a limited closed loop of operating system, which basically focuses on control, destruction, whatever you want to call it, enslavement or whatever else. And that's what the operating system is. So this was really, from its design at the time, was an opportunity for us to really see how far we can go. It was an experiment. And the experiment's still running in a way because it's still, that operating system still exists, and we still have parts of it operating within us. Okay, and this is what we're doing with the purging process. The other part: do we have free will? Okay, well, you have free will to come here. You have free will to leave any point in time. You have free will to accept or not accept. Accept. What happens is we get convinced that that's the way. As when you look at it as a child, you come here and you don't have any disposition of how it's going to play out. You have a very minimal. And most of it, you get conditioned because you adopt it. Sometimes it seems like it's forced on you. You adopt it, but you always have the free will to say, do I take it on or I don't? Because you could see people. Look at it this way. Let me give you an example. There's parents that have 1, 2, 3 kids, 4 kids, sometimes 10 kids, whatever. But work with the small ones. Let's say 3. You will notice the same parents treat the kids the same way, try to teach them the same way, they go through the same schools, but each one is different. Each one would abide to certain rules and not. And some will be completely rebels. So you'll notice that it doesn't matter what you say to them, it's really up to them to decide, am I going to accept this and make this my life or not? Or am I going to take just a little piece of it? Or do I, don't take any of it? It's the choice that you have. So free will exists. You can step in and out anytime. You can also choose what you give power to. But it's very alluring to come here to play the game. Now, of course, that's changing. And the reason I'm saying all of this is because we're going through all of this and it's changing. Now, the light codes, like I said, for all of this makes it very unstable. And this is what's happening now. The sun is very powerful in what it provides. We also have a solar beam of light that's coming in and all these other portals that are opening up and channel opening up that all bring in different levels of energy. And what it does is that is actually minimizing all of this operating system. So even the hybrids are having a tough time to keep it together. But they're also getting tired of the game because the hybrids can have those programs shut down eventually once they're no longer playing the role and don't need to play the role. So this is the thing. The reason that we're having all this heavy consciousness coming into place right now and people are really shifting and opening their eyes is because of all of that's coming in and that we're being bombarded with to facilitate us to go through these changes. Okay. What was I going to say? Was there something else I needed to cover? Or did I forget?
Questions, but
okay.
Just, those were the ones on.
Okay. Because a lot of people have also, when we're looking at it, I don't know if how many of you have heard of the draconian laws. Well, basically those laws operate within this operating system, which is, or what the reason they call it draconian laws is because the draconians applied those laws. Now, we have to understand, at all of these points in time, okay, and everything in between, we had visits from these particular species, Anunnaki and Draconians, were coming in, and when to keep things under control, they would present themselves as gods. They were presenting them as they were this ultimate and that they had to follow the rules or else. Okay? So a lot of these beliefs that are being carried on for thousands of years about these so-called deities, let's use those words, deities, were just basically those visitors that were coming here, setting the protocol, and then using some of these hybrids to maintain it. So that's how these so-called rules, laws, and limitations and so forth, and even the dictation of what can be shared or not. So this is kind of how it all came about. So now we're reversing all of this. This is the other part. Now, I wanted to mention one more thing. So where we are right now, okay, we've gone through some stages where it was agreed upon collectively and with our brother sister souls that work very close to us, and a lot of them are donors from the various genetic encodements and DNAs that actually make up our physicality, to assist us to do this transition, because we became so out of balance, so out of alignment with the rest of the galaxy and even our solar system that it needed to be brought online. So this is where we work together collectively to turn off various things. So one of the things that got turned off was the inverted matrix, and that happened the end of 2019. The inverted matrix was turned off. The transmission from the moon was turned off, and that's why you won't feel the same impact of the mood changes and everything else when there's a full moon. The only time you're going to feel it is if you still have a memory that, oh my God, when I have the full moon, I feel a certain way, so what you're doing is activating within yourself. So that was brought into it. The other thing is the realm, the reins, the control structure, if we want to talk about the Anunnakis and also the Draconians, they are no longer navigating. So these programs that were put into place are not reinforced any longer. So they start to break down, and they're starting to break down. So the guidance, or the guardians, if you want to call it that, was the original guardians were here for 1,000 years, self-governance. Then the guardians actually switched roles, and they were running it for the last 10,000 years. It switched again. So now the originals, our original guardians or programmers, have started coming back, and they're assisting us to switch from that old system to our original design with the upgrades in it. And that's what we're doing. So the last, the switching that occurred was in around March of this year, which was the last part. So these were the other phases that went off. Now the ego is the only thing that's still active, but it's not supported any longer. So that means that it's starting to break down. Now, there's so much I can cover here because the sun has a very powerful effect on us in a way to break down the operating system, these operating systems. That's where it has, because the sun's frequency has increased, the brilliance, the spectrum of light has increased. It's whiter and so forth, where it used to be more yellowish, because it carries much more higher frequency, which is assisting us to not only re-stimulate our original program, but it also deactivating more and more of the older programs, and also reigniting or reactivating a lot of the DNAs that were put into the dormant state, so that more input will come across. So as we're looking at all of this, we are now facilitated and supported in a very, very powerful way to be able to transition. So any idea that it's the end of the world, or the fact that Armageddon or anything of that nature, those are going to be just staging that really does not play out. And the thing is, the intervention, because we've had 3 stages of removal that we've had already. The first stage of the removal was at the beginning of 1987. The next removal was 2012. I'll make that 1987. And, well, 2020 is the third. Okay, so that basically was the end of 2019, right at the end, and it was 2020. So the same thing with that, was right at the end, and that was at the end of 2012, actually. So really it started in 2013, but it was the end of 2012. That all of these layers of operating systems have been removed, and even the control structures and so forth. So that's why everything is becoming much more to the surface. We're seeing much more of everything, and people are much more aware of what's going on and are really paying attention, because this is the thing. Now, our brother, sister souls that are, traveling around the planet in ships and whatever else, that are facilitating us at this point in time, are assisting us as best as possible without disempowering us, without coming in as a savior, without taking us out of our experience, because we have agreed collectively that we're going to do it together, because we're going to learn a lot through the transition. We're going to become much more enriched with the experience, and we're going to become more enlightened in a very specific way that would not be possible. Because you have to understand, it doesn't matter how the game was set up, it has a uniqueness of this transition going to the extreme of one end of really not having any access to knowing anything outside of your existence on a physical plane, from sourceness. So now going in where the merging is occurring and where we're shifting from that, all of that we've experienced couldn't have been experienced without all of that. So even that being brought into the equation has served in a huge way. Do you want to ask something?
I have a few. I'm not going to be able to answer or ask all the questions because there's quite a few from both the Facebook page and the YouTube page.
Okay.
So I'm just going to pick and choose. Okay, so one of the questions is, if the Anunnaki have released their ancient control, who are the group of beings still trying to run the planet for their own benefit?
There isn't anymore. There isn't the beings anymore. The only thing that is just the hybrids. That's all gone as of last month. Okay, so they have no control whatsoever. So the whole reign of having them to say, I want to run the planet, is gone. The only thing is, the hybrids are still following the operating system, but their operating system is breaking down too. And the other thing is, even the ones that that are still even on the moon and so forth, they've already said we are breaking down. We're not breaking down. We're letting go. We're not even going to try to control anymore, because now they're not even going to any longer. So they're getting tired of the polarized game, because it actually stops them from moving forward too, because they've been operating within that operating system for such a long time, and it's gotten really stagnant. And the wars and all of that stuff. And the wars was it really a war? It's not the kind of war we talk about right now, but it was in a sense where those levels of polarization was light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, total unconscious, conscious, and it was that, and all the games that were created around that. So there is not a race any longer that's trying to control it in the old way. Now it's just, we have guardians that will get us back on track, and then after that, after we've gone through the transition, we're going to self-governance again, which was the original, how it worked originally. So, and then for the time frame, we don't know what that is all about, because we'll have to see how that plays. So there's so much on the back end that is assisting us right now to become self-empowered. And this is why I've talked about self-empowerment for a while now, because the self-empowerment is realizing that you are this sourceness and you can navigate and shape this. So all the restrictions that we had are slowly breaking down. One of the barriers we still have within ourselves is us, because we are so deep in the fact that these things exist. Like, I can use the analogy of the elephant, right? The elephant, when it's small, it's tied to a strong pole, and it gets trained as it's growing up that once that rope is around its leg, it cannot pull it away. Now, you've probably seen in circus or other examples in a video, whatever it is, where you see a huge elephant with a rope tied to a little peg that's in the ground, which is easy to remove. It just has to nudge it and it's gone, right? But it doesn't move because it thinks it's tied. And this is the thing, is we are still reversing on the whole idea that we are still tied down, and that everything that exists is hard to remove or change. For example, a lot of people right now are afraid that, okay, if I don't have a job, I don't have this and that. That's the idea, the belief system, that we have to have a certain infrastructure for us to have resources for us to be able to survive, which is, first of all, this operating system. It is not our true operating system. Our true operating system does not look at survival. It's flourishing because it creates environments. We all co-create an environment together that actually allows us to be free without being enslaved in anything. Now, of course, we all have beautiful skills. We all have beautiful offerings and so forth. So we will offer and do certain parts of it, and anything that we don't want to do, there's a tremendous amount of technologies available. Now you look at it. Even the whole idea right now there's the struggle of the hybrids saying we don't want to let it go until they get to the point they realize that they can actually self-empower. They can actually step forward. For example, look at all these technologies that have been restricted. A lot of technologies have been shared. We can have free energy. We can have, healthy bodies. We can have clean food. We don't even have to consume all of the stuff that we're doing. There's ways to manage and control every part of it where the technology is not, detrimental to or to our operating system, our health, or even Gaia or anything of that nature. But it's all held back. Even look at the medical system and so forth. Just to give you an example, they're not introducing other methods. The research is not really looking at how can we make things better and look at every part of it as the whole body rather than little pieces and this is all we can do. We can give you this, we can give you that. And the same thing with education. All the new discoveries are not even getting and taught, and all of the history stuff is just being emphasized, what happened, whatever it is. You could see all of this that's there is still the old part, and we still give a lot of people still give a lot of power to it, but there's so many more people every day stepping into, we're not going to give power to this. We're going to now go into it. And we're not talking about fighting the system. We're basically now bringing it into obsolescence and really transforming it. Go ahead.
Kylie is asking, so who are the beings offering support to this process? Octarians, etc.?
Yeah, the Pleiadians play a really huge role. The Syrians are also involved. The Arcturians are involved. There's also some of the Lemurians are there. There are some other species. Even the reptilians are involved here and there, and not the hybrid ones, but the natural one. But the Pleiadians are one of the main leaders. Any groups that I've seen, and anytime there's a gathering that I've been invited to in that state, that group is usually the one that comes along, and they're always checking with us all the time what would be beneficial and so forth. So they really want us to bring us back online so that we would match more the energies of the galaxy and our solar system so that we are not just on off, because we were quarantined for a very long time. Our energies, our whatever was playing on the planet was not involved in the energies being transmitted into the galaxy because it was so out of balance. And the experiment was allowed. You have to understand this was allowed because we kind of asked for, let's see what we can do with this. And even as source, you could say, okay, well, let's see where it can go. So that's what's involved. We also have our inner Earth population that actually is that vibrates at fifth dimensional consciousness and so forth, that are also very supportive too. So, anyways, there's a lot of it, and everything is working with us, even though a lot of us are not conscious of what's going on. Some of the ones that are connected to the back end part of it, where they're actually seeing some of it, are involved. But normally they're involved because they can play a particular role, not because, oh, one's better than the other or there's an exclusivity. That's not the case right now. You want to ask a question?
I was going to say, all our DNA strands are all associated with different beings,
Species,
so
yeah.
I would assume that all of them would be part of who are supporting us to get more online.
Yeah, exactly. So even though that a lot of them are not participating in physical form and that are not, on the planet, like surrounding the planet and so forth, and working with us and working with our, each of those DNAs, the 12 DNA strands, each one are, like each DNA strand is a transmitter receiver, and each one is basically contributing to help us upgrade. So this is why a lot of the DNAs are starting to get reactivated so that we would be able to utilize those streams of consciousness and also awareness that comes with it at this point in time. So that's also supporting us at the moment. Now, what else was going to like? Is there anything else?
There is other questions.
Okay, so I'm just going to carry on. I'm just going to see if I have to make a second part or we can cover all of this in this. There's quite a bit still. So I never know how long it's going to take to describe this, to explain this. I don't want to get into deep. The reason I'm sharing all of this stuff is just to give you just an idea, because there's a lot of different stories around. And listen, I'm sharing this from my inside, looking at different things, or at least my soul's inside. It's not Franco's inside. So that you get a part that you can put the dots, connect the dots sort of thing, if you want to call it that. So you get just an understanding. But the thing is, we're not looking at making that bad and this good or whatever it is. We have to understand that that was a journey that we decided to accept. But now we've got to the point where it's not really serving any longer. It's not serving for us individually, because we really want to go into that natural state. And as much as this game was fun to play, it's losing its luster, and this is why we're changing it. Besides the fact that we've gotten so far out of alignment with the rest of the planets in the solar system, and also in the galaxy airport. Now, you're going to ask something?
Only if you want me to.
Okay, is it how related it is to what I'm just talking about?
There are lots of general questions, just wanting a little additional information. So I don't know how many of those you want to answer, because I know you have a certain thing to.
All right. So right now, I'll just bring it to date. So we are being supported on a big way. Not in a position where it doesn't allow us to have our own self-growth and our own self-navigation, because everything that we're receiving and noticing at this point in time is really awakening ourselves. We're going through that ascension that they call it. Ascension is really just basically connecting more to your source essence and bringing that as part of your creation and reality. And it changes the playground, it changes our physicality, it changes a lot of things that are going on. So right now, with the game that we have, you've noticed that there's so much information being shared in the sense of what's happening. It's breaking down, economies. It's, putting fear into us, and that there's this nasty so-called virus or whatever it is that is actually going to kill us or anything of that nature. As much as, even the intent, they say, well, the intent is to enslave everybody, to control everybody. Because if you really look at it, this information that we're talking about today was actually talked about, was shared as a high potentiality 10 years ago as what would happen around this time. And so when you look at it and say, okay, the hybrids are now clamping down, making sure that we get, exposed to all of these things, and we're caught up in this whole thing. As much as that, on one level, is the original agenda, and the original agenda is let's try to control, but you will notice that it's so sloppily done, and it's so apparent that the more it's pushed, the more we question, the more we do research, the more other people are coming out. So what it's doing, it's breaking down our pattern of believing that was, what do you call it? The foundation of what is really, really happening. Because if you really look at what's going on, is it what they're saying it is? It's not. Okay, it is protein codes that do attach to cells and do create some adjustments into the cell, and may have some symptoms that can lead to possibly some more severe symptoms. But in fact, just let me throw this other. And I think I've talked about it, but when this was rolled out, what we're dealing with right now, it was to take a very powerful impact a huge impact, even with the intention of saying, okay, it's going to wipe out a lot of people, especially people that are a certain age or a certain physical deterioration, because that's how we're going to weed out the weaklings, or what they call the eaters, or whatever. They had lots of different names for it. However, as much as they rolled it out with that intention, it didn't play out that way. Why didn't it play out that way? Because we had agreed not to give focus to that, so our brother sister souls have worked with us to make sure that it did not take that toll. And it didn't. It's not taking that toll. It's not doing so they had to fudge numbers, they had to fudge a lot of things to make it look like, and to keep people in the fear state. But that's also a beautiful thing, because the more you keep people in fear, the more they become desensitized. And to the point where, is being in jail, and I'm not saying jail in the sense of jail, but being locked up, worth it, with the idea that maybe we might get harmed if we go out there or experience life. It gets to a point that says, this is not life. I want to go live life differently, and I don't care what risk it is. It's like somebody saying, go play a small life. You go over there, play in that room, and I'll take care of you. And you don't have to worry about anything, and you just stay in your room and whatever else. You may feel protected for a little while, but guess what? You're going to get to the point of, there's got to be more to this. I'm not settling for this. Well, a lot of us have over the years with our ego's operating system. I got to take care of you, got to take care of you, got to be careful of this and that. But a lot of people are playing their lives bigger and bigger now. They're taking more chances, as they call it. That's what they call it. It's basically they're adventuring more than before. And it's the same thing here. So this is great, because now it's okay, I'm getting tired of all this news I'm hearing. I'm going to look at something else. And then at the same time, you're going to get to a point where you're becoming restless, because people are becoming restless and say, okay, that's enough. I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to do it. And then as people do that, the structures don't have any power over you any longer. And it's being played out to such level of what you can call insanity, so that we get it. We see it. Oh, okay. This is what is going on. And it's so poorly constructed, with no backup or anything of that nature, that you start to see between the scenes. You start to see what's going really on. But there's a purpose for that. The purpose is for us to be able to say, okay, what am I choosing to put my energy on? What am I going to use as my navigational system moving forward? Do I put power into this? Do I use that to govern my life or anything of that nature? And this is the thing. Because, and I don't want to get too deep into it further, because it's going to take a while, but I've talked about it already, where, we have the freedom of what we want to choose as part of our experience. So as much as what rolled out was supposed to have one particular mandate, it is not going that way. It only enough to stop us, enough for us to pay attention to what's going on, enough to get off the treadmill or the hamster cage and decide, okay, how do I really want to play my game of life? Do I still put value in all of these things that I had? Or sometimes we're going to be losing certain jobs, whatever it is, right? Do I go back to that, or do I do something else? Do we still have to have the system to operate this way? We start to look at all of the things and saying, who made up these rules? Because you have to look at it. Every single rule, every single idea of how the game plays is all made up. We get to see more of that and then say, okay, does this still serve us? Do we still have to go do something we don't like, or don't even appreciate, or don't find passion in, so that I can have a certain amount of monetary coming in so that I can actually survive? Like, that's a rule, that's a game. I mean, you know that money, not everybody does, comes out of thin air, because it's just made up. Plug it into a digital computer, print out some pieces of paper or little coins or whatever else, and even that's starting to phase out. So there's no limits to it. And tying it to a resource or anything of that nature is still another rule. And who made up that rule, that resource is that? And there's no equal balance or anything of that nature. So you're going to start seeing that. So as much as the role of the media is to keep us in that idea that the inverted matrix is the way of life, being in 3D, 2D is the way of life, and really keep feeding the ego. At the same time, it's pushing us to a point where we start saying, you know, I'm going to start switching that off. I'm not going to give that attention to it. How do I want to live my life? How do I move forward from here rather than staying where I'm at this point? Because what does the media do? It tries to program you, reinforce the program, and program you. And I'm talking about every part of media. I'm not even talking about just news and movies and music and education, all of these other things. It just reinforcing the program. And it stimulates the emotion of fear, it stimulates all of that. So it's really just breaking down that part of it. So as much as you get pushed to it, you finally say, hey, I'm not doing this. And a lot of people are doing that. They're actually weaning themselves away from listening to all the propaganda or whatever else is being fed to them, so that they say, okay, I'm going to give myself some time to really go within, or to really look at it from different viewpoints and make my own decision of what is of value to me and what really is taking place. And then we can take action together. We start taking actions individually, and then you start taking actions together. So even coming to the point, you know, where we talk about sovereignty or anything of that nature, what does that really mean? You know, that I am not owned by anybody, that I'm not controlled by anybody. It's really saying, I am me. And I'm here playing in the playground like everybody else, but I am an individualized expression in a collective expression. And no one can tell you how to do anything. We bought into the idea that we had to follow the rules, but that changes. That's changing right now. And that doesn't mean it's going to be anarchy. And it doesn't mean that in one way or another, because, you know, we don't have those rules, that we go crazy. That's a transitional part, because realistically, that's not our natural operating system. Our natural system that's coming in is harmony, balance, playfulness, resourcefulness, adventure, you know, joyfulness, you know, playing in those realms and feeling very, very much in alignment. So when you're looking at the different systems that support all of that, that separational confines, choosing at this point in time, yeah, okay, I have free choice, and I'm the one that needs to consent or agree to participate or not. A lot of people don't know that you actually have consent. You actually have to consent, sorry. You have to consent or agree to play any particular game. And I know you could say, well, no, I got forced into it. Well, there was an agreement to experience being forced, but as you're shifting, and many people are, you'll notice that that doesn't have the same impact or power over you, because you start to self-empower. You're basically now changing the old modality of seeing things and playing things to this newer realization. So you will notice as we go along, as we're moving along, that you can start looking at all the different systems, and you can see how it operates and how you feel that it now needs to be adjusted to operate that supports you, or just eliminate them altogether. Now, of course, we have to understand we're going to go through transitions, and through transitions, we're going to have certain opportunities for us to, you know, use that as a bridging and say, okay, I'm going to go from, say, this type of monetary system to something else. But eventually what happens when you get into your natural state, that doesn't even exist. The fact of, you know, survival depends on you go do something of some sort, will no longer be in place. But at the same time, we all have skills. We all have opportunities to offer something to the collective. And we'll do it because it's coming from passion and so forth. And you'll see once that gets reignited within you, you will see, and of course the roles are changing, you will see that you'll get more onto that, and you'll see certain things, because if you really, really, really look at it, okay? When you break it down, only about 80% of everything that's out there in services, products, What else? What else they have out there? Services, products. Yeah, mainly those things. 80% of what we call jobs, what we call different organizations and so forth. 80% of them are just make work projects based on old rules, old ideas, and so forth. There's only 20% that is still viable currently right now, that would still provide a service, but eventually even those will upgrade. You look at it, you go to a grocery store, how much of what's in a grocery store is actually consumable that will assist you physically? Yes, there's tons of products, tons of different foods and whatever else. I'm just using the foods for now. We'll talk about the rest another time. But the foods and everything else. But you've looked at everything that's been manufactured is just basically sensorial experiences that do not, it's not a full body and sensorial, it's more of a sensorial for that little square sensory part at the tip of your tongue that tastes certain things and whatever else, but it doesn't harmonize with the body itself. So you look at it, 90% of whatever is in the store, if not more, is basically not. It's just there because we convinced ourselves that we needed to have all of those things. But as you go along, you'll notice a lot of that stuff will wean out. The amount of food you need is already starting to change for a lot of people, especially as their energy changes, but also gravitating to very natural, clean food. And all of the different systems that we have in place right now that replicate and try to convince us that we have to have new styles, new this, new that, every so forth, will start fading away, and then very basic. And when I say basic, I'm not talking about limitations. You can have some really nice things if you want to wear clothes at that point in time, or anything of that nature, or fashion, whatever. But there's a practicality to it in the sense where it serves you, but at the same time it also gives you opportunity to express without buying into collective. Because remember, every fashion that comes in, they have to convince you that you join this collective. If you have this style, you're in, whatever that is. We go that style, you're in. If you're out of that style, you're out of fashion and you're no good, whatever. So you have to look at it, and that's a pocket. You have to convince them, and this is what the marketing businesses are all about, is convincing you that you need something, even though when you don't, or the fact that you're not even drawn to that. But if you don't have it, then you may not look the part, or you're not going to belong, or you're going to stand out, or anything of that nature. So that's just one thing, and there's so many layers. So we start to look at it. So these are the transitional aspects that we go through. So now that we have all of these things playing out and people are tapping into it more and more and understanding what's going on, we're looking at the self-empowerment. But we have to really, the best way to do that is we can't have judgment, we can't have hatred, we can't be blaming it, whatever's there now. It doesn't matter if we're going to blame the hybrids, if we're going to blame the so-called hybrids in their elite groups, or whatever role players, the Anunnakis, or the Draconians, or anything like that. You can't go and blame them. They provided a service, they played a particular role, we engaged, we played, now we're just upgrading. So the thing is, if we're going to judge, and we're going to see all these role players, because there are lots of role players. The ones that we're talking about, the hybrids, are not down the chain. They're the very top of that little pinnacle there. We're not even talking the 1%. It's like a fraction of a percent right here. All the other levels behind here, they're not. They've just been programmed and agreed to take on the program to play the roles of the instructions that come from the top. That's all. So you could say, well, I can blame them. Our misery of our life, our suffering of our life, our not living our life is their fault. Then we're going into blaming and we're disempowered. We have to see it, that they are playing the particular role. We can say, okay, we're not done. We don't need you anymore. But we're not needing it because if we get rid of them, then our world changes. No, we change the world and they become obsolete. And they're already becoming obsolete. And they're already not even reinforced anymore because collectively we decided that it was gone. And the same thing, you don't want to hate, you don't want to blame, you don't want to judge, you don't want, and amongst each other, because all you're doing is giving power back to saying, oh, I'm going to give power to the operating system. As we connect with more of our true self, you will notice more and more and more, as you're becoming more of your true self, that you see it's a game. You see how easily you can shift all of that. And we're going through a lot of those now because people are starting to realize more and more that, wow, it's just a game. We can change this. We can shape it. We don't have to hold it in this way because it doesn't match. And that's all we're doing. We're aligning ourselves more with that, and we're receiving more of this. So everything that's going on, energetically and otherwise, are there to assist us. And we've been having one blast of another, even again today. You know, we've had several strong ones that are supporting again today, tomorrow, and it's going to go right to the end of the month. You know, that there's going to be some pretty powerful waves that are coming through to facilitate us, to really to step in. It's not there to take us away from anything. It's there to stimulate what we're already choosing to do or have agreed to do, to kind of energetically support us and code support us and so forth. And you can see right now with everything that's playing out, a lot of the distractions have been eliminated from a lot of people. So the distraction of going to work, distractions of going to gatherings, distractions watching sports, distractions, these just to give us time to reevaluate what the importance is and really then notice the difference once these things do come back into play. So this is all giving us time to do this inner work, they call it. Inner work, meaning that you're looking at your programs, stories, belief systems, and perceptions that have governed you, and now you're choosing at this point in time, okay, let me look at all of this and remove and let go of all of those things. So, to expedite the changes, before I answer some questions.
Are you going to answer some?
Possibly, we'll see how much time. That won't be long. For us to clear out our programs, I know I've said this many times, and also to make the changes much more effective, including the hybrids and the elites and whatever else we want to look at this point in time, you acknowledge their presence. You appreciate the role that they've taken on. Okay? It's not an easy role. None of our roles are easy at times, especially the ones that have come in, you know, that are here to help with the changes and have those oppositions in place. Have an appreciation for their presence. Have an appreciation for the roles that they played. Be very thankful for that extreme polarity that was not possible any other way for them to take it on. And we have to understand, these hybrids are not there permanently. You know, they were put in 10,000 years ago, but they keep, you know, new souls have to keep coming in, new bodies have to come out at the same time. That's why they keep a lot of the bloodlines very close to each other, to keep those encodements in there so they don't have to go through the major programming. But all of that coming into place, they are at this point where they want to be relieved of those responsibilities and that role playing that they've had. So again, the souls coming in will say, okay, I'll take it on for a little while longer, whatever it is, and then they swap, right? But a lot of times the souls don't even participate to the same degree because it's very difficult. So we have to see it with appreciation and love, because it's a beautiful dance, a beautiful game. And when we start seeing right now, we notice people are becoming more kind. There's even groups now that are projecting the idea, let's be kind to people. Let's be kind. What's happening? It's bringing that natural state up with us, and it negates a lot of the operating system that was in the so-called category of Lucifer and satanic construct operating systems that, you know, anybody can take on, and all of us have it to some degree, which we're just purging out, and some have purged it out completely, so it's not even in their operating system. But, you know, as long as the ego is still active, you still have part of that operating system within you. Now, don't demonize it, don't see it as something bad, see it as something that served, and now you're putting it out of obsolescence. And we'll notice as we go along, we start to experience more peace. You'll also notice that, you know, the focus is not on wars or anything else as much anymore, because of the fact of we've created a shift in focusing on something else. But people are uniting in a way too. and people are feeling more close to, let's support each other, let's get through this. But the getting through is not getting through because we're going to, you know, we're in survival mode, we got to make it through this. It's more, let's get through it, let's learn what we need to learn, shift whatever shift, even though it's not totally on the upper part of the consciousness, but it's there on the underlining within themselves. Let's see how fast we can go through the questions. Is there a lot of them?
No.
No. Okay.
I'm going to ask which ones seem pertinent for right now.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to the free will,
Mm-hmm.
back then.
Okay. Back in
So is it a mixture of free will and deterministic system, a divine plan, in other words? How does synchronicity fit in with it?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And the synchronicity part of it is, again, what is synchronicity? It's basically creating alignments and having certain things line up to a point where there's an agreement that, say, for example, there's synchronicity that you're at a particular place to be exposed to certain things, or a synchronicity that you are here on this part of the planet or this part of whatever, or you come into a relationship. Those are all alignments. Synchronicities are alignments that we come together to serve each other or to create the perfect environment for whatever we are ready for the next stage. And a lot of times the next stage is a shifting within ourselves where we are actually allowing certain parts to be triggered within ourselves so we could see certain operating systems or upgrade our operating systems. So right now, if you look at it, everything that's played out has been synchronized in a way where it staged this. I mean, who would have imagined that we would be where we are right now in the sense of being all at home and not able to go out, and all of the stopping of majority part of a lot of the things that we were doing before. You know, to say, well, how that happened? That was something that was necessary and beneficial regardless of the narrative, regardless of how it was the original intent from the small instigators, but collectively we agreed for it because it gives us this perfect platform. I don't know if there's something else you wanted to add to that.
No, not at this point.
Okay. But yeah, we do have the free will with all of that, and synchronicities, alignments, and I don't remember what the other word was, but okay, go ahead.
So this is another question.
Mm-hmm.
What about the prophets? Were they dissidents, objectors, or part of the reprogram we are experiencing now?
The what?
The prophets. You know, people that...
Prophesized? Okay. So regarding the prophesizers, okay, they at times provided the opportunity of what they were able to see were things that were to come about. Because remember, this was not a loose what's the word? I can't think of it. It was not just like, oh, let's see where it goes. Just let's see what position it takes, whatever it is. It wasn't anything about that. It's still, regardless of who was operating and keeping an eye on it, at this point in time, it said, we're only going to allow it for a period of time, and we're going to monitor on a regular basis what would be best to roll out at certain times to create, because motion is still movement through evolution and enlightenment is still a necessity. So regardless, it monitored all of that along the way to make sure that we, even if we got stuck for a long period of time, that it would be able to go forward. So a lot of the prophecies that have been made were based on potentialities. Now some of them have changed, some of them aligned because they were coming up and, okay, that could be utilized. But we're always monitoring on a collective scale. We're monitoring unconsciously from a superconscious level, and also with the ones that are operating with us to assist us at this point in time, that we look at what would be beneficial. So a lot of the prophets at certain times were a lot more accurate because there was very minimal changes. Now there's much more changes. So the prophets, it was written, some of the stuff that was going to happen in 2020. And here we are. We're having exactly that, which seemed, when it was shared originally in 2010 and then 2014, it was brought up again. I think they're using a book written in 2010 or something like that about this rolling out of 2020, because that was a cutoff that said, okay, great, we're going to have this thing show up that's going to look like a pandemic. It's going to stop everybody. It's going to, shift things in a big way to give ourselves the opportunity. Now, you could look at it from that perspective and say, oh, that's a horrible thing that's going to happen. Or, yeah, that's a beautiful thing that's going to happen, because it activates more of a movement forward.
Okay. Another question. What category does the Queen fit into?
I don't want to answer that. There we go. I've answered.
Okay.
Didn't say a word.
Okay. Is it true that we are temporarily connected to universal AI to support us during the exit process from the old matrix?
Yes. We've already reconnected with the, okay, so there is a bridging that's going on, but that is supporting us until we can connect, because the inverted matrix operating system has been turned off. We weren't quite ready for the organic matrix. The organic matrix is all around us and it is operating, but how much are we using? So we have an artificial, an AI that was put in place to help us bridge. So it's only temporary to help us bridge to connect with that organic matrix fully. The bridging was necessary for a particular reason, and that is so that we wouldn't quickly shift from one stage to another like this. It allows us to be able to navigate and really get, it's like this, you're in an environment, then you're yanked out of the environment, thrown into another environment, and what happens is you miss the opportunity to kind of be partaking in the shift. So that is being offered right now is helping us to empower so that we can actually do the shift, so you can say, yeah, okay, I was part of it, I did it, these are the steps I've done, and so forth. Okay.
While we're still in this duality, is it still not a game? While we're still living in this duality, is it still not a game?
It's all a game.
It's still a game.
It's still a game. All of it is a game. All of it is a game. It's just the game that we've been playing for a long time is very dualistic. It has duality in it, light, dark, but that is gone. We got rid of the necessity of duality in 1987. In 2012, the end of 2012, we actually made it even more obsolete. The only reason we're still playing in the duality, or it looks like duality, is because we were still working, we were still being fed through the inverted matrix, ego, and we were playing, and the transmission, all of that still projected duality. But the necessity for us to flourish or operate within the duality was gone. Even because in 87, when we had the first conversion, which was the first layer of removal of the operating system, karma was removed, the need for polarity was removed, the satanic code, which was self-destruct code that is consumed to destruction, was removed as a requirement. Also being coming in and taking on a role, for example, from a karmic sense, where if I came here to be the victim, normally you would play the victim role throughout your whole life, okay? And in another life, then you would be a victimizer if you were when the polarity part was necessary. But that got removed because it slowed down the process. So the requirement of balance was no longer required. So a lot of people still believe it exists because they expect it to exist, because the polarity world is if you do something wrong, you got to pay the price. That's polarity. That's meaning that in one way, if I do this, I got to get punished. It's still that whole separation thing. Instead of saying, okay, so the whole idea is if you're going to do something negative, for example, and you are, from a soul perspective, are not requiring this negativity as part of your experience, but you have that pattern still there because the ego is still driving you on that, it will create an opposite so that you actually get the message. So is it karma coming back to you? No, it's actually your construct and alignment so that you actually get to see some of your actions in play so that you can actually break the pattern or shift it. It doesn't have to be done that way because we're already doing it energetically and consciously, but at the same time, if that's necessary, then that will play out. Go ahead. Was there anything else?
Yes, just a minute. I'm trying to find it. Question. It was about DNA and how it was turned off.
Mhm.
Just a second. I'm just trying to find the question because they keep going back. Seems to have gone missing. Anyways,
Do you remember roughly what it was?
yeah, it was just roughly how was the DNA. She didn't use the term turn off, but
Deactivated? Or
yeah. So how was it turned off? And she wanted to know technically how that was possible.
Okay, well, it's like anything. If you had a radio and you turn it on and it works, it's like you turn on a switch, okay? And you can adjust the volume. So when the operating system was put in, this operating system, which was that inverted matrix operating system, that change operating system, you have to understand the DNAs are transmitter receivers. They continue to transmit and receive experiences and consciousness gained by the different species that provided it. Okay? For example, we have a Palladian DNA. We have a Syrian DNA, a Arcturian, even a reptilian DNA. And we have many others. When you're looking at that, whatever they're experiencing is being shared with you. So it plays a role in your own operating system. So if you're getting new updates constantly and it's facilitating you in your operation, then to keep it confined in that old operating system was not possible because you would advance. Not even this could have the power because you would have too much other input. So what they did is actually tune down access to it. So they actually code it so that you would not be able to access it. And it's there, it still gives enough to keep the body inherent, but not enough to upgrade the body. So the body had to actually learn its own innate consciousness to be able to handle its environment, because the body does continue to adapt and adjust. The system is designed for that. But it would not enough to advance itself. So that's how it's done. So it's like a software. You go in and you say, okay, I'm going to program it that you cannot get more than this. So it's like going on the computer and they now restrict you from accessing certain web pages or going and accessing information from other parts of the world. Similar to that.
Just gonna do a couple more, and then we're gonna end.
Yeah, because we're
So is the chemtrails going to end soon? Because some people are still seeing lots of them, and is our planet the only one that has gone through that extreme dark experience?
Okay. There's been quite a few planets that have gone through it because they have gone to other planets to provide that operating system. A lot of them have moved through it, and others have basically, the planets are no longer inhabited by what you call the original ones that were put there. And then others have played that part. So there are some that have evolved through it. Others have not. The Atlanteans have not. And then And when I say, but that was still planet Earth. But there are the other planets that have gone through that process, and so some have made it to transition, others have not, and it was just another okay, we'll do it. I mean, we're mortal. The souls are immortal. The different levels of soul consciousnesses and so forth are immortal. So it's always stored. It's in the big database, and you can plug in whatever you need to plug in. So that was that. What was the other part?
The other one was the planet, if it's gone through before, and the chemtrails, are they going to end?
Yeah. Okay. So other planets has gone through it. Our planet has already gone through it itself already, in a few other occasions. I think more. I think this is like the third or fourth time. I can't remember because I remember looking it up, and I'm not looking up here. I'm talking about in the archives of the Akashic Records sort of thing, and saw that this program has been offered a few times, and we're the first ones that are actually on this planet that I know of that's actually going to move through it. So that's a positive. As for the chemtrails, they will eventually stop. Now the chemtrails are very interesting because the chemtrails are dumping a lot of chemicals and whatever else, and that's why they call them chemtrails. Sometimes they call them contrails, whatever, but chemtrails. Those were being done because of the fact that they two parts of it. One was that we would be exposed to these chemicals and heavy metals that would go into our body, so that the different frequencies and satellites that would be transmitting, that were still playing out in this older system, would still be able to maneuver or control how our physicality would respond and how much health we would have. That's not working as well. The other thing, the reason for the chemtrail was also to diminish the amount of sunlight coming onto the planet, and that was the whole idea, is to control the climate. And this is the whole thing with this, carbon stuff that they've been talking about and so forth. So they use that as an excuse to layer. So if you notice, they try to block the sun as much as possible, but they're also using HARP on different parts of the world to kind of manipulate the weather so that we're not exposed to the sun, because the sun has so much code, so much frequency, that it would assist us to transform. And that was the other reason why they tell you to slather so much, sunscreen and so forth, so that you would not get as much of those light codes. But there's, the sun has been compensating by increasing. So even if it's cloudy or if there's a lot of layers, a lot of it's coming in. But if you can get direct, it would be even much more powerful. And you don't put all this sunscreen in. You just expose yourself a little bit at a time, and your body gets adjusted to it, and it knows how to use those frequencies coming in. And it helps actually change the cellular structure in your body. So you're actually going more from the carbonic to the silicate to crystalline. And each stage of it carries more information, more light, more higher frequency. We're good? Okay, we might address that another time, because we're going over 2 hours now. So okay. So anyways, go ahead.
I do copy the questions that we don't get to and put them on our ever-growing list.
Okay.
At one point, we will do a Q&A only, and we'll just ask the questions that have come in or we didn't get to on the chat.
Okay.
There are some people, I think, that would ask questions that you could have already covered that material earlier on in some of the episodes.
Yes.
So,
that's true.
So keep that in mind. If you haven't watched all the episodes and you're just tuning in now, to maybe go back and catch up from the beginning, because you kind of started at the beginning and kind of went down, like why the soul came here and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, go check it out and see if your answers are there that you're looking for, if you haven't seen them all.
All right. So we've just hit a new mark. That's the longest episode ever so far. We got close to the 2-hour mark. This time we actually hit the 2-hour mark. Anyways, I thank you for participating. Our next episode will be this coming Thursday, and then after that it will be on Saturday. This past while we had a few back-to-back, only because there was some important information that needed to be shared. So just to kind of put the baseline. The next episode will cover a few extra little details of what we've didn't get to cover today, and possibly plug in some questions in there built into it or not. We'll see. The request has come to make the episodes a little shorter and a little bit more focused, in the sense of instead of covering a lot, because they're long, and so instead of cramming so much in, I'm going to try to break it down so that we don't do so much, because sometimes it's difficult for people to sit there for 2 hours or an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes. And what's that? And for myself standing here doing this conversation for that long period of time. So the future ones, starting this Thursday, we'll try to make them shorter and cover smaller amounts of topics at a time, so that we get to. If there's something important that we have to plug in at any point in time, we will add an extra episode here and there as we go along. So anyways, thank you again. I thank you if you enjoyed it, give your thumbs up wherever you are, or like it, or whatever it is. If you need to subscribe, notification bell, depending on where you're at. I thank you for all the people that have sent in support to help us keep going and cover our expenses and whatever else is necessary to bring more content. I do appreciate what has been offered. We're open to receive, again, further to help us put more content out. And that's it. So enjoy, share with other people, and I'll try to keep it a little lighter for other ones at this point. This one was a heavy one. I was a little, I don't know how to present this without making it too heavy for people. This was not to confuse. It was just to give you a background so that you can have an understanding. So, okay, great. Thank you again.